Hey guys, tonight we travel back to feudal Japan, where survival wasn't about medals or honor codes, but about blood on your blade and no hesitation in your heart. This is the story of a man who didn't just fight samurai, he redefined what it meant to be one. He wandered alone. He fought alone. And one by one, Japan's finest warriors fell at his feet. His name: Miyamoto Musashi. Duelist. Ronin. Philosopher. Legend. Forget the polished armor and quiet tea ceremonies. This is the raw, muddy, violent world of a sword fighter who carved his legacy not with glory, but with grit. No master. No mercy. No second chances. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy slipping into the past with me. Let me know in the comments what time it is where you are, because somewhere in the world, someone's drifting off to this very story. Now dim the lights, maybe pull that blanket up a little tighter. Because tonight we walk barefoot into the dirt. With a sword in one hand. And death waiting around the next corner. Let's begin. Imagine a sky stretched taut with smoke, not clouds. The wind smells not of spring blossoms, but of steel and scorched earth. This is Japan in 1584, an age they call Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period. But warring feels too polite. This is a time when entire clans are swallowed whole overnight, when loyalty is traded for land, and peace is a myth whispered between the clang of swords. In the craggy, forest-cloaked hills of Harima province lies the modest village of Miyamoto, humble, rough, and unremarkable to the world. And yet, in this obscurity, a storm is born. A baby wails into the morning air. His name is Shinmen Benesuk, though history will remember him as Miyamoto Musashi. He isn't wrapped in silk. There is no astrologer's chart or noble birthright. He is swaddled in coarse linen, cradled in calloused arms. His first lullaby is the distant shout of warriors training in the dirt yard, his first toy a wooden bakken lying beside his father's mat. His father, Shinmen Munisai, is not a man of warmth. Once a duelist of acclaim under the Ashikaga shogunate, now reduced to a grizzled ronin with sharp eyes and a sharper temper. His love is strict form. His affection is correction. He does not raise a boy, he tempers a weapon. And from the start, Benesuk is not like other children. He does not laugh easily. He does not fear pain. The village mothers speak of him in hushed voices, mud-caked, wild-haired, with eyes that never blink at blood. He watches the older boys spar and imitates them with sticks, not for play but with eerie precision. He learns quickly. Not just the swing of a sword, but the rhythm of tension, the pause before a strike, the quiet before a scream. By 5, his knuckles are raw. By 7, he spars with men twice his size. And by 10, he never cries, not when bruised, not even when bleeding. There is something feral in him. Not the discipline of a noble samurai heir, but the cold brilliance of a child who understands, this world does not reward kindness. It devours the soft and forgets the slow. In a time where steel decides fate, he knows, instinctively, he must become harder than the blade itself. Munisai trains him relentlessly. Before the sun rises, drills. After nightfall, lectures. Footwork in the stream until his feet are numb. Grip practice until his palms split. He teaches his son to kill before he teaches him to write. Strike without hesitation, he says, again and again. Hesitation is death. Mercy is for men who can afford it. But Musashi doesn't break under the pressure, he thrives. The villagers begin to notice. That boy, they whisper. There's a wolf in his blood. And then, at 13, the world shifts. A samurai named Arima Kihei, a warrior of a respected school, arrives in town. He is everything Musashi is not, robed in fine cloth, voice trained in poetry, movements polished like court ceremony. He comes to demonstrate swordsmanship. An exhibition. A performance. The villagers gather to watch, eager for distraction. And Musashi steps forward. Barefoot. Dirty. Holding a crude wooden sword with both hands. His voice is quiet, "I'll fight him." Gasps ripple through the crowd. A child challenging a trained samurai. Madness. Kihei laughs, a deep, practiced sound. "Boy," he says, "I won't strike a child." "You won't get the chance," Musashi answers. The duel is agreed. They meet outside the village at dawn, the mist still curling along the grass. Birds do not sing. The villagers form a loose circle, murmuring prayers under their breath. Munisai stands apart, arms folded, unreadable. Kihei bows. Musashi doesn't. There is no warning. No flourish. Musashi surges forward like an animal loosed from a cage. No grace, no ritual, just speed and violence. Kihei blinks, half raises his blade, and it's too late. Musashi's bakken slams into his ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. A second blow cracks against his skull. The samurai falls, blood blooming from his temple like a red chrysanthemum. Silence. Not triumph. Not applause. Just stunned silence. The villagers stare at the boy. Not because he won. Because he never hesitated. Munisai does not clap. He does not congratulate. But that evening, as they sit in the dark, the old swordsman pours his son a cup of bitter tea and sets it before him without a word. It is the closest thing to praise he will ever give. That night, Musashi does not sleep. He lies awake, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Something has shifted inside him. A door opened. He has tasted power, and felt the emptiness behind it. He has killed. Not just a man, but something in himself. The innocence of youth, the final tether to softness, gone in a burst of bone and blood. And though his body still lies in that small village, his spirit has already stepped onto the road. A road lined with corpses and whispers. A road that will make him legend. Or monster. Perhaps both. The boy who did not bow has begun his war with the world. And the world will never be the same again. The world doesn't end after your first kill. It simply goes quiet. In the days that follow Arima Kihei's fall, life in Miyamoto stumbles back toward its usual rhythm. Farmers still coax life from reluctant earth. Children still chase each other through the dusty lanes. But something has changed. Not in the village, in you. You no longer belong there. The sky seems lower. The hills less wild. The air too soft. The victory that should have satisfied you left a strange hunger instead, a hollow place that sleep won't fill. And so, at 15, with no ceremony, no tearful farewell, you walk away. No pack, no plan. Just your sword, a ragged cloak, and the weight of your name whispering behind you. Miyamoto. Not just a birthplace now. A ghost that will follow you down every road. You are ronin, masterless. In a land where loyalty defines a man, you choose the void. It is a dangerous decision. Without a lord's banner, you are exposed. You have no protection, no purpose, no title. You are nothing. But you are also free. Freedom is not comfort. It is not a hot meal or a warm futon. Freedom is sleeping in the woods, waking to frost on your lips. It's eating roots when rice runs out. It's stitching your own wounds with shaking fingers. But freedom is also the ability to choose your path, even if that path leads through fire. And yours does. You roam. Through wind-beaten plains. Through towns that glance sideways at your unwashed face. Through forests where wolves call you brother. You challenge dojos when hunger claws your stomach and your blade itches in its sheath. Most refuse you. Those who accept, regret it. You do not duel for pride. You duel for truth. For refinement. Every fight is a question, am I better today than I was yesterday? Your style grows stranger, leaner. You abandon rigid forms. You start to move with instinct, like water slipping through cracks. Your footwork becomes unpredictable. Your strikes, merciless. You learn to fight not with strength, but with disruption. You fight as if your opponent is not a man, but a pattern to be broken. Your reputation spreads faster than you do. They whisper, a boy with no master, fights like a demon, doesn't even wear armor. You don't need armor. Armor slows the body. But your body is a blade. And like a blade, it lives to cut. Sometimes, you use a wooden sword. Sometimes a branch. Once, a farming hoe. You begin to understand, it's not the weapon. It's the intent. And your intent is unwavering. There are days the road breaks you. A collapsed footbridge. A fever in the mountains. A winter so cold you gnaw bark for food and hallucinate your father's voice whispering, still alive. Good. Suffering sharpens you. You learn to laugh at pain. To bow to exhaustion like it's an old friend. To fight the weather as fiercely as you fight men. Each trial teaches. Each wound whispers. Each step forges the legend. And yet, the world doesn't want legends. It wants order. You are chaos in human form, no lineage, no school, no temple to kneel in. So the schools begin to see you not as student, but as threat. They send their best. You cut them down. You try not to feel the joy, but it's there. Not in hurting, but in understanding. With every duel, you see more clearly. You see fear before it manifests. You feel intent before it strikes. You don't just defeat bodies, you dismantle minds. The more you win, the less you celebrate. Not out of humility. But because the pattern becomes familiar. And you are bored of familiar things. Then, one rainy evening, in the town of Banshu, you see it, a dojo practicing a style you've never witnessed before. Movements like birds in flight. Fluid. Elegant. Deadly. You ask for a duel. The master laughs. You fight his student. He loses. Another steps forward. Also loses. The master no longer laughs. When you face him, something sparks in your blood. For the first time in months, you are not the storm overwhelming a candle. You are steel meeting steel. The fight is not long. But it is beautiful. You win. And when the master bows, face bruised, pride shattered, he says, "Would have welcomed you as my student, had you not come to ruin me." You do not answer. You simply bow back. The truth is, he did teach you. In those few minutes of violent exchange, he gave you more than lessons ever could. On the road again, your thoughts drift to your father. What would Munisai say now? Would he be proud? Disgusted? Does it matter? No. You are not his son anymore. You are not anyone's. You are Miyamoto Musashi. The man who walks alone. And still, your hunger grows. Not for blood. But for meaning. You begin to feel it, faintly, like a scent on the wind. The sword is not enough. There is something beyond the blade. You just don't know what it is yet. But you will find it. Even if you have to carve through heaven itself to get there. The road winds beneath your bare feet, packed dirt and sharp gravel biting into your soles, but you don't flinch. Pain is a familiar companion. Hunger too. At 15, you've walked away from the only home you've ever known, not with a tearful farewell or a father's blessing, but with a sword slung across your back and a fire gnawing in your chest. You've chosen the path of a ronin, masterless, nameless, alone. In a world where lords rule from lacquered halls and samurai bend the knee for rice and honor, your decision is madness. To wander Japan without the protection of a family crest, without the backing of a warlord, is to ask to be cut down like a weed in the wind. But you don't care. You don't walk the same path as other men. You never have. Instead of armor, you wear a tattered cloak. Instead of a polished pair of daisho swords, you carry what you can, a battered katana, a worn wakizashi, and a mind sharpened by years of brutality. You sleep in shrines abandoned to dust. You eat whatever the land offers, roots, river fish, even scraps left behind by foxes. You don't complain. This is your training ground now. The open world. And every shadowed forest, every mist-draped mountain, is another test. You drift from village to village like a ghost with calloused hands and a predator's gaze. Most people avoid you, the wild-eyed teenager who smells of smoke and sweat, who stares too long and speaks too little. But some see something else. In the way you move. The way you stand, silent, balanced, ready. A few brave dojo masters take notice. They see the strange young man with no master and too much confidence, and they laugh. Then you challenge their best student. And then you win. Not gracefully. Not with honor and ceremonial bows. You win brutally. Efficiently. You strike like a falling tree, no wasted movement, no flash, just a crash that leaves your opponent sprawled in the dust. Their students watch in stunned silence. The masters watch in something closer to fear. Who is this boy who duels like he's been doing it for lifetimes? You don't stick around. You bow once, offer no name, and vanish down the road. Word begins to spread. A whisper on the wind, traveling faster than you do. There's a young ronin wandering the provinces. He doesn't fight like anyone else. He doesn't lose. They don't even call you by your name. Not yet. They call you the wolf. Not because you look fierce, but because you're wild. Untamed. A loner, unbound by codes or clans. And like a wolf, you never fight for show. You fight to survive, and you do it well. Your duels aren't about proving yourself to the world. They're about shaping yourself. With every opponent, you learn. You start seeing the patterns in people. The way a man grips his sword too tightly when afraid. The faint twitch in a shoulder that always comes before a strike. You read them like weather, and adjust like wind. You fight men older than your father, faster than your reflexes, taller than your reach, and yet you win. Not always clean. Not always pretty. But always. Sometimes you duel with a real blade. Sometimes a stick. Once, famously, with a bamboo fishing pole. What matters isn't the weapon. What matters is your mind, flexible, ruthless, always one step ahead. You learn to anticipate. You learn to control the rhythm of a fight, bending it until your opponent is dancing to your beat. And somewhere along the way, something clicks. You're not just dueling anymore. You're evolving. Others cling to styles passed down through generations, sacred forms, honored techniques. You break them. You improvise. You invent. In your hands, the sword becomes an extension of instinct. And instinct? It doesn't play by rules. By the time you're 17, your name is starting to matter. Miyamoto Musashi. The name feels heavy, sharp. Like a blade drawn slowly from its scabbard. You begin to challenge formal schools, respected dojo with banners and reputations to protect. They laugh at first. Then they lose. And then they stop laughing. Some schools refuse your challenge. Others send multiple students at once. That's fine. You fight 2, 3, even 4 at a time. The result is always the same, bodies in the dirt, eyes wide in disbelief, and you, walking away like nothing happened. You don't take trophies. You don't seek glory. You seek truth, the kind that's revealed in the space between breath and blade. Villagers whisper that you're a demon. That you don't sleep. That your sword is cursed. But the truth is simpler, you are obsessed. Every moment you're not fighting, you're training. Swinging your sword beneath waterfalls. Meditating under trees. Watching how hawks dive and how waves crash, because everything teaches you if you're willing to learn. And deep inside, something darker grows. A question that burns in your chest at night. If I can't be beaten, what am I becoming? You push it away. The road is long, and there are still challengers waiting. But you begin to sense that your journey isn't just about becoming the best swordsman in Japan. It's about becoming something else. Something no one has seen before. Not a samurai. Not a warrior. A force. A myth in the making. And so you keep walking. Dust on your cloak, fire in your eyes, and the storm of your name gathering behind you, Miyamoto Musashi. By the time you're in your late teens, your name no longer drifts on whispers. It crashes like thunder. In smoky inns and tea houses, they speak of the wild ronin who fights like a storm, wins like a curse, and disappears before the dust settles. Not a samurai. Not a mercenary. Something else. Miyamoto Musashi. The name begins to carry weight, not because you've declared yourself great, but because you haven't had to. Your reputation spreads faster than you can walk. And with it comes something new. Fear. Not from bandits. Not from farmers. But from trained warriors, men who've spent their lives in dojos, perfecting their stances, polishing their steel, and reciting codes of honor with every swing. You've already defeated more of them than you can remember. They fall not because they're weak, but because they're predictable. You, on the other hand, are not. While they follow kata, you follow instinct. While they wait for the opening, you create it. While they grip their swords like heirlooms, you wield yours like a brushstroke, carving your own shape into the world. And somewhere in the shadows of Kyoto, a name reaches your ears, Yoshioka. You've heard it before. Everyone has. The Yoshioka school is one of the most prestigious in the land. Swordsmanship royalty. Backed by nobility. Connected to powerful lords. Trained in centuries-old techniques. And proud. Very, very proud. They don't just teach swordplay. They define it. And now, they've heard of you. At first, they scoff. Some backwater ronin challenging their supremacy. Laughable. But pride is a fragile thing. And when whispers reach their ears that Musashi is calling them out by name, offering to duel their master, something inside them cracks. They accept. The duel is arranged in Kyoto. The ancient capital of art, of tradition, of reputation. The perfect stage. You arrive without fanfare. No retinue. No robes. No ritual. Just your swords, your feet caked in road dust, and that stare, the one that unsettles even the boldest men. Your opponent is Yoshioka Seijiro, head of the school. A man used to bows and ceremony. He expects a challenger to act like a student. To bow. To offer honorifics. To follow the unspoken script of martial etiquette. You ignore the script. The crowd hushes as you step onto the dueling ground. The air smells of wet stone and cherry blossoms, and tension. Seijiro stands tall, polished, perfect, his every movement practiced like calligraphy. You stand loose, relaxed, like a man who might yawn before killing. He draws. You watch. And when you move, it's like thunder breaking the sky. One blow. One single, devastating strike. Seijiro crumples. A gasp rips through the crowd. Their master, humiliated. Defeated. Shattered by a ronin in rags. But you don't celebrate. You don't smile. You don't even blink. You turn, step over his fallen form, and walk away. The Yoshioka cannot let this stand. Not in Kyoto. Not with half the city whispering their shame behind fans and paper walls. A second challenge comes quickly. This time from Yoshioka Denshikiro, Seijiro's brother. Younger. Stronger. Hotter-blooded. He won't make the same mistakes, they say. You know better. Another duel. Another crowd. Another perfect warrior stepping into the arena with the weight of his school on his shoulders. He charges, raw power surging through every strike. You deflect, evade, read him like poetry written in large, loud letters. He telegraphs every move with his fury. And you, calm, methodical, strike once, clean, surgical. Another Yoshioka falls. This time, there's no murmur. Just silence. Thick. Choking. The kind of silence that falls after the temple bell stops ringing. The Yoshioka are unraveling. You've cracked their pride wide open. And they have only one son left. A boy. Yoshioka Matashikiro. Barely old enough to tie his sash without help. But lineage demands blood. So they name him head of the school and declare a third duel. You accept. But you're no fool. You know what's coming. It won't be a duel. It'll be an ambush. The final, desperate gasp of a collapsing dynasty. So you do what you've always done, you change the script. You arrive early. Before dawn. While the shadows still cling to the stone walls and the Yoshioka men are barely finished hiding themselves in the grass. They expect you at sunrise. You arrive in the dark. You find the boy, Matashikiro, standing alone. Dressed in ceremonial garb, holding a sword that looks too big for his hands. You kill him in a single stroke. Fast. Merciful. Final. Then the trap springs. Yoshioka men pour from the trees and rooftops, more than 20, blades drawn, voices raised, rage burning. You don't hesitate. You move like lightning across water, darting through their ranks, cutting where you must, dodging where you can. You don't stay to win. You don't stay to gloat. You disappear. By the time they realize what's happened, you're already gone, just a footprint in the mud and a name in their throats. The Yoshioka school collapses. Broken. Humiliated. Disgraced. And you, Miyamoto Musashi, the lone wolf with calloused hands and a 1,000-yard stare, walk away again, undefeated. But something's changed. This wasn't just another duel. This was the destruction of a legacy. And you realize, with every opponent you defeat, the world grows quieter. Fewer swords remain. Fewer challenges stand between you and the summit. And for the first time, as the sun rises over Kyoto and the streets return to life, you wonder. What happens when there's no one left to fight? The road curves away from Kyoto, winding through the wooded foothills like a slow exhale after a long-held breath. You walk alone. No fanfare. No followers. Just the crunch of gravel beneath your sandals and the memory of the Yoshioka clan folding like silk under steel. Their legacy shattered, not by an army, but by one man with 2 swords and no master. You don't look back. You never do. Because looking back invites regret. And regret is not something you carry. Not anymore. You were born in a land fractured by war, where loyalty is a blade to the throat and honor is whatever the victor says it is. Samurai tie themselves to lords, to banners, to promises whispered in darkened castles. They fight for gold, for titles, for songs sung by people who never held a sword. You fight for something they can't even name. Freedom. Mastery. Silence. The wilderness stretches before you, a tangle of pine and fog, of valleys so quiet they feel untouched by time. The sword at your hip taps a rhythm against your leg. Not a song of battle, but a reminder. A heartbeat. A companion. Everywhere you go, whispers trail you like smoke. Did you hear? Musashi crushed the Yoshioka. They say he doesn't sleep in beds. That he dreams standing up with one hand on his sword. He's not a man, he's a shadow with teeth. You hear them. You don't answer. Let them mythologize you. You're not here to be understood. You're here to become something sharper than steel. In every province, there's a new dojo. And in every dojo, a master who thinks they know everything. Until they face you. You don't fight like they expect. You don't bow 6 times. You don't wait for perfect footing or poetic timing. You strike when the soul hesitates, when pride opens a window and fear pulls the curtains wide. They call it dishonorable. You call it survival. One duel ends before the opponent draws his blade. Another ends with a broken jaw and a sword snapped in half against a tree. One ends in laughter, yours, because the challenger was so arrogant he forgot how heavy a sword feels in actual combat. You don't stay to explain. You walk away. Because you've learned that explanation is just decoration for those who need approval. You don't. Somewhere in your wandering, you start to feel it again. That itch. That old restlessness, curling behind your ribs like smoke. Victory, once intoxicating, begins to taste bitter. Not because you're losing. But because you're not. No one challenges you anymore. Not truly. The best have fallen. The rest are only echoes of men. Stiff-necked disciples clinging to tradition like a drowning man to driftwood. And you, soaked in wind and dusk and hard-earned clarity, you begin to wonder. Is there anything left out there that can make you bleed? Then, a rumor. A name. Sasaki Kojiro. It reaches you in fragments. In half-laughed stories and cautious tones. They say he's fast. Unbelievably so. That his blade is longer than any man's pride, and he swings it like it weighs nothing. They call it the Manahashizo, the drying pole. Ridiculous. But dangerous. Kojiro is undefeated. Not just undefeated, admired. He doesn't sleep in ditches or eat stolen rice. He wears fine robes. He teaches lord's sons. He duels with elegance. Precision. A mirror of you, if you had chosen a different road. If you had chosen safety. Position. Prestige. And just like that, the fire flares again. Not anger. Not envy. Hunger. You seek him, quietly. You don't announce it. You don't challenge him in a crowded tea house. You ask no favors of lords or nobles. You just walk. Province to province. Listening. And at night, under the pale stare of the moon, you train harder than ever. Because you know, in your bones, that Kojiro is not like the others. He won't hesitate. He won't flinch. And when the moment comes, you'll need to be ready. But this time, ready means something different. It means sharper. It means colder. It means stepping so far outside tradition that even you might not recognize yourself when it's done. One morning, in a town where the mist clings like breath to your skin, a messenger finds you. A challenge has been issued. Kojiro has accepted. The duel will take place on Ganryujima, a small island, barren but clear, with the sea as witness. The date is set. The world holds its breath. You don't prepare the way others might. You don't sharpen your blades. You don't polish your armor. You don't memorize any parting words for some crowd of cheering fools. You do one thing. You carve an oar, a simple wooden paddle, into a weapon. Rough. Crude. Ridiculous. But in your hands, deadly. Because you understand what Kojiro doesn't. The fight is won before the blades touch. In the mind. In the rhythm. In the space between heartbeat and action. You plan to meet him not just in combat, but in chaos. As the boat carries you across the waves toward Ganryujima, the ocean breathes around you like a sleeping dragon. You sit quietly. Swordless. Calm. And for the first time in a long time, your blood sings. This is not just another duel. This is the summit. The moment you find out if the mountain you're climbing has a peak, or if it's just you, alone, against the sky. And you're ready. The boat grates against the shore of Ganryujima. A soft, scraping sound, almost gentle, belying the tension that charges the air like a storm about to break. The island is small, a barren crescent of stone and sand kissed by restless waves. Seabirds circle overhead. The wind smells of salt and iron. You step off the boat slowly. No retinue. No banners. Just you, dressed in plain clothes and carrying a wooden or carved down into a makeshift bakken. Rough. Uneven. Laughable to anyone watching, but you know better. This isn't arrogance. It's calculation. Across the sand, Sasaki Kojiro waits. Tall, statuesque, and every inch the image of a warrior prince. His robes ripple like silk banners. His sword, the Monahashizo, the famed drying pole, gleams in the morning sun. Nearly 4 feet of razor steel, absurdly long, and wielded with a grace few men could match. His eyes narrow as you approach. You're late. On purpose. You can see it, the twitch of his jaw, the shift in his stance. You've already landed your first blow, and the duel hasn't even begun. Kojiro steps forward, his voice sharp. You insult me by arriving late. And unarmed. You say nothing. You just raise the wooden sword and nod once. A silent gesture that says, I'm ready. The gathered spectators, lords, retainers, curious villagers, lean forward. Their breath held. Their sake untouched. The moment hangs frozen in time. Then, movement. Kojiro strikes first. Fast. Blinding. A flash of silver carving the air. The swallow cut, the technique that made him famous, said to split a bird mid-flight. Fluid, elegant, perfect. But you're not there. You've already shifted, already moved through the strike like wind through reeds. And your bakken, your crude wooden blade, crashes down with a sound like a thunderclap. A single blow. Crack. Kojiro staggers. Then crumples. The beach falls silent. No one breathes. A legend, shattered. Just like that. Your opponents used to laugh when you showed up looking like a drifting monk with wild hair and a stick. But they don't laugh anymore. Not after today. You stand over him for a moment. Not gloating. Not victorious. Just quiet. Kojiro's eyes meet yours, full of pain, yes, but something else too. Understanding. He knows what this meant. You weren't fighting for a reputation. Or revenge. Or honor. You were fighting for something rarer, the truth beneath technique. The pure core of combat, stripped of ceremony. You bow, just once, and turn away. You don't wait for the verdict. You don't wait for cheers. You don't wait for the gossiping mouths and the ink-stained scribes who will twist this moment into legend. You walk back to the boat. Because in your mind, the duel was over long before the blades moved. The journey back across the strait is silent. The boatman rows without looking at you. The sky is clear, but the air feels heavy. You stare into the water and see not your reflection, but Kojiro's. His strike. His stance. The beauty of his technique. And the way you ended it. Not because you were stronger. Not even because you were smarter. But because you understood the moment better. Still, something in your chest aches. Because that moment, that collision of equals, will never come again. You've climbed too high. There is no one left. When you return to the mainland, the world erupts. Tales fly like arrows from mouth to mouth. Musashi killed him with a boat oar. He was late on purpose, to unnerve Kojiro. He carved the sword on the ride over. They get bolder with each telling. Soon they'll say you killed him in one strike without blinking. That you floated across the water. That you never even touched him, you just willed him to die. You let the stories spread. Let the myth grow. Because the truth is quieter. Sadder. You didn't just kill a man. You buried a mirror. Kojiro was the closest thing you ever had to a rival. And now, he's gone. The seasons change. You move through villages and towns like a ghost. People recognize you, bow low, whisper in awe. But their respect feels thin, weightless. You've started dreaming of rivers. Of ink brushes and mountains. The sword still hangs at your hip, but it feels heavier now, not in weight, but in memory. You visit no dojos. You challenge no masters. Instead, you sit by quiet streams, carving wood, watching clouds. Because you've begun to understand something that even victory could not teach. The greatest duels are not against men. They're against yourself. And you're only just beginning that war. You leave Ganryujima behind, but it does not leave you. For weeks after the duel, you walk as though something is missing, not in your bag, not on your belt, but behind your eyes. The world feels thinner. Like the moment Kojiro fell, something vital tore loose from the weave of your life. The duel is already legend. In the inns and markets, the tale grows more ridiculous with every telling. They say you showed up riding a shark. They say your wooden sword was possessed by the spirit of an ancient warrior. They say Kojiro cried before he died. None of it is true, and none of it matters. Because when they speak of the duel, they speak with awe. But when you think of it, you think only of silence. In the solitude that follows, you begin to drift. You no longer chase duels. No longer test yourself against local champions. You stop seeking, because there's no one left to seek. Instead, you begin to reflect. At night, you stare into still water. Not at your face, but at the flicker of thoughts underneath. Who are you now, when the blade no longer thirsts? Who are you without an opponent? One morning, near a mountain village, you stop a boy mid-swing. He's practicing alone, mimicking some local master's stance. You correct his grip. You show him how to feel the weight of the sword, not just hold it. He stares at you, eyes wide. Are you him? You nod. Once. That's all. He bows low and doesn't speak again. But the next morning, you find 3 boys waiting. Then 10. By the end of the week, it's 20. And just like that, you begin to teach. It starts informally. You correct footwork here. A flawed stance there. At first, they come for the stories, the man who killed legends with sticks and vanished into the woods. But you give them more than stories. You teach them what no one ever taught you, how to listen to their instincts, how to see their own breath, how to silence the mind before drawing the blade. You don't give them poems. You give them rhythm. You don't give them rules. You give them reality. And they transform. Word spreads. A masterless swordsman teaching in the wilderness. A man who fought the great Sasaki Kojiro and walked away without looking back. Warriors, students, wanderers, they come in droves. Some seek glory. Some seek secrets. Some just want to see the storm up close. You give them all the same thing, discipline. You build nothing formal. No temple. No school. Just a space. A space for learning. A space for unlearning. A clearing in the trees becomes your dojo. A fallen log becomes your seat. The sky becomes your roof, and the wind becomes your bell. At dawn, they train. At dusk, they reflect. At night, they sleep like stones. You remain silent for long hours, watching them. And sometimes, just sometimes, you smile. Not because they're good yet. But because they're learning to become. But even in this quiet chapter, the world won't let you forget. One evening, a messenger arrives. Polite. Nervous. Bowing so many times he might as well be dancing. A powerful lord has heard of your name. He requests your presence. A duel? A challenge? No. A position. He wants to hire you. A title. Land. A generous salary. In short, everything you once rejected. You remember being younger. Hungry. Dirty. Desperate to survive. That man would have crawled for this offer. But now, the idea of being tied to a name, to a house, to anyone's shadow but your own, it feels like a cage. You decline, of course. Not rudely. Just, simply. And the students watch you, eyes wide. They don't understand why. Not yet. But someday, they will. Later that night, by firelight, you begin writing again. Not calligraphy. Not poetry. Not even instructions. But thoughts. Observations. The shape of things. You write about rhythm, timing, emptiness. About the moment before the strike. The moment that defines everything. These pages are not for glory. They are for clarity. And slowly, the Book of 5 Rings begins to whisper itself into your hands. You tell your students something the next morning. Something they don't expect. There will come a time when I am not here, you say. When the sword no longer swings. When the battle is not outside, but within. They glance at one another, unsure. You stand, tall against the rising sun. I will teach you everything I know, you add, but in the end, you must fight your own battles. Then you walk away to meditate. And leave the thought hanging in the air like a blade suspended in time. As weeks pass, the camp changes. It becomes quieter. More focused. Less about you, more about them. And that's how you know the teaching is working. Because you've stopped creating followers. You're helping to create masters. But the shadow still lingers. Kojiro. You see him sometimes, not in dreams, not as a ghost, but in the movements of your best students. The elegant stance. The perfect balance. The will to face anything. You see him, and you. And the wind carries both names like leaves across a fading battlefield. You don't teach forever. Eventually, the wanderlust stirs again. A pull deeper into the mountains, toward silence. Toward solitude. You explain nothing. You pack your things in the early dawn. And before anyone can stop you, you're gone. Back to the road. Back to yourself. And so begins your final journey. Not toward a battle. But toward understanding. Because mastery isn't a place. It's a path. And you're still walking it. You walk alone again. The path beneath your feet is quieter now. Softer. No cries of challenge, no applause, no whispers of your name floating ahead like windblown banners. Just the steady rhythm of your steps and the breath of the forest. The duels are over. Not because the world has grown peaceful, it hasn't, but because something inside you has shifted. You've traded the ring of steel for the rustle of trees. And strangely, you don't miss it. Not yet. You travel light. A pack with a change of robes. A brush, a pot of ink. Your swords, yes, but even they hang differently now. Not tools of death. Not badges of power. Just echoes. You pass through villages like smoke. The elders recognize you with widened eyes, half in awe, half in fear. Some offer food. Others just bow, low and long. No one asks for duels anymore. They know better. You sleep where the sky is your ceiling and the earth your mat. You eat what the land gives, chestnuts, fish, a stolen peach here and there. You speak to no one for days. Weeks, sometimes. And still, you're not alone. Because in that silence, something wakes. Something you've kept buried beneath years of instinct and motion. Memory. Late one night, beside a river as black as ink, you hear him. Not with your ears. With something deeper. Sasaki Kojiro. You see his stance, tall, proud, that ridiculous drying pole of a sword, and the way his body folded like a puppet with its strings cut. You don't feel regret. You feel the absence. He was your mirror. And now, you're staring at the reflection and seeing only yourself. That is the price of mastery. Not blood. Not scars. Solitude. So you go higher. Into the mountains, where even the birds don't bother with song. You find a cave, shallow, damp, empty. Perfect. You name it Ryugando. Spirit Rock. It will be your final home. Not for hiding, but for distilling everything you've ever known into ink and thought. You stop calling yourself a swordsman. That part of you is finished. Now, you're a student again. A student of death. The cave is unforgiving. No fire pit. No furniture. Just rock, stone, silence. But it welcomes you in its own way, like a teacher who speaks without words. And you begin your final study. You rise before the sun. You meditate until your breath feels like wind. You paint calligraphy until your wrist trembles. You write, not just about fighting, but about the space between fights. About rhythm. About awareness. About emptiness. The void. It becomes your obsession. Not because it's mysterious, but because it's honest. It asks nothing of you. And in return, it gives you everything. People find you. They always do. Sometimes a lost traveler, seeking shelter. Sometimes a curious monk, hearing rumors of the ghost swordsman in the mountain cave. Sometimes, former students, grown now. Changed. They bow. They bring gifts. Some ask questions. Most leave with more silence than answers. But they return with a different walk, lighter, more grounded. You don't say much. Because words are wind. And some truths only echo in silence. One morning, as the mist curls around the cave mouth like breath, you write it. The Book of 5 Rings. Not to teach killing. Not to brag. But to pass on the truths the blade taught you. You divide it like the world. Earth, foundation. Rootedness. Stillness before movement. Water, adaptability. Flow. Yielding without surrendering. Fire, conflict. Timing. Acting with decisive clarity. Wind, perception. The study of others, to reflect on the self. Void, that which is beyond, pure instinct, clarity, spirit. Each scroll is simple. Direct. Not poetry. Not parable. Truth, stripped bare. You write with no thought of readers. Only the knowledge that one day, someone will sit where you sit now, confused, searching, and need a guide through the dark. You know what's coming. You feel it in the shake of your hand when the brush hovers too long. In the ache in your knees when you kneel too deep. You are no longer young. The wolf still watches the world with sharp eyes, but its body is growing slower. That, too, is a lesson. Even the strongest fall. Even the sword must be sheathed. You don't mourn it. You've had your share of victories. But this final one, might be the most important. You will not die in battle. You will not die screaming your name into the wind. You will die seated, calm, composed. With your sword beside you. With your thoughts clear. With nothing left to prove. Because you've already won the only duel that ever truly mattered. The one against yourself. The mountains whisper their approval. The ink dries. The silence deepens. And Musashi smiles. The mountain breathes around you. Outside the mouth of Ryugando Cave, the wind rustles through pine needles like a quiet drumbeat. The world below, once so loud, filled with the clash of swords and the roar of ambition, now feels impossibly far away. You are still. But you are not idle. Each day is deliberate. You rise with the light, stretch with the discipline of a man still sharpening his spirit. You prepare tea with hands that once shattered enemies. You meditate so deeply that time itself seems to kneel beside you. The duels are long behind you now. But the greatest battle still looms, not with another warrior, but with the inevitable. Death. And you are ready to meet it like any other opponent. Face to face. The body betrays you first. Not suddenly, no, it's far too dignified for that. It begins in the joints. A stiffness that lingers longer each morning. Then the tremble in your fingers as you try to draw a clean calligraphic line. You ignore it at first. You are, after all, Miyamoto Musashi, killer of champions, breaker of schools, master of two swords. But no title, no legend, no swordplay can stop the rot of time. And so, you lean into it. You do not rage. You prepare. You begin to put your affairs in order, not like a noble with scrolls of inheritance and armies to command, but like a ronin who has mastered discipline. You finish the Book of 5 Rings, sealing the last scroll with a calm exhale. No flourish. No ceremony. Just ink, truth, and the echo of your journey pressed into parchment. You review your possessions, 2 swords, 1 brush, a worn cloak, and a memory too vast for words. You leave instructions for your students, few in number but strong in will. You tell them not to build a shrine. You were never meant to be worshipped. Just understood. Your students notice the change. They ask if you are unwell. You lie gently, not with your words, but with your eyes. It's just the wind, you say. But the wind, too, knows the truth. It carries it in the way it no longer lifts your robes with the same defiant snap. In the way the pine trees seem to bow slightly when you pass. The world is preparing to let go. And so are you. Then comes the day. Clear. Still. The sky so blue it feels painted. You wake knowing. There is no fear in your chest, no doubt clinging to your ribs. Only clarity. You bathe slowly in the mountain spring, letting the icy water kiss the last aches from your bones. You dress in white, not as a warrior preparing for battle, but as a monk returning to the void. Your swords are laid beside you, one on each side. Not to be drawn. Just to witness. You sit cross-legged on the stone floor of Ryugando. The same pose you used when you wrote your truths. The same pose you've used in battle, in prayer, in meditation. You close your eyes. And you wait. But not in silence. Because inside, the world blooms. You see your father's hard eyes. You feel the sting of your first duel. You hear the cheerless wind of Miyamoto village, smell the sweat of dojo floors, taste the blood of 100 battles, and see again the face of Sasaki Kojiro, frozen in time. All of them. All of it. Rising inside you like a tide. Not haunting. Not shaming. Honoring. You take one last breath. And release it. No fanfare. No final words. Just a stillness so complete, even the insects outside seem to hold it sacred. Your students find you hours later. Unmoving. At peace. A sword in each hand. A calm smile on your lips. You died as you lived, undefeated. But more importantly, unchained. And yet, death is not the end of Musashi's path, only a doorway to what comes next. Because your body may rest in stone and dust. But your name is just beginning to wake. They bury you in the mountains. Not in a palace, not under a shrine of gold, but beneath a simple stone, carved roughly, resting where the wind never stops whispering. The cave, Ryugando, remains behind like a sealed memory. The ink of your last scroll barely dry. No funeral procession. No drums. Only the hush of your students' footsteps retreating down the path, and the weight of what you left behind pressing into their chests like iron. You were never a man for ceremony. You were a man for truth. And now that you're gone, the stories begin. At first, it's whispers. A merchant tells of a strange man who could split a candle with a wooden sword at 20 paces. A farmer swears he saw you meditate under a waterfall for 3 days, unmoving as stone. A fisherman claims your ghost visited him during a storm and taught him how to steer by the stars. And just like that, the man begins to drift into legend. They speak your name with reverence in places you never walked. Children imitate you with sticks in the dust. Drunken samurai argue about how you fought. Writers, most of whom never saw a duel in their lives, begin to turn your battles into theater. Plays. Poems. Woodblock prints. One artist depicts you with fire in your eyes, 2 swords crossed over your shoulders like wings. Another paints you calmly sipping tea beside a mountain of broken blades. You are the wolf. The monk. The master. The man who never bowed, not even to death. And the world, it eats it up. Of course, the truth gets muddled. They say you fought 100 men at once. That you cut a swallow in mid-air with one stroke. That your stare alone could stop a man's heart. You would have rolled your eyes at all of it. Because you knew something they didn't. Myth is not meant to be accurate. It's meant to be remembered. Your book of 5 rings is passed from hand to hand, scribes copying each page with reverent care. Samurai read it before battles. Merchants read it before negotiations. Generals sleep with it under their pillows. But the smartest among them, the rare few who truly understand, know it's not a book about swordsmanship. It's a book about awareness. It's not about killing faster. It's about living smarter. And in this way, Musashi does not fade. He multiplies. Decades pass. Then centuries. And still, you do not disappear. They build statues in your name, tall, solemn, sword at your side, gaze fixed on something only you can see. Scholars study your duels like scripture. Leaders quote you in boardrooms. Martial artists chant your principles before sparring. You become everything. A warrior. A thinker. A monk. A riddle. You become a mirror that men hold up when they ask themselves, am I living fully? Am I sharpening myself, or am I simply existing? And the mirror answers without words. And now? Now your story rides electricity. It hums through cables. It flickers on screens. It dances from the mouths of narrators long after midnight. You're in video games. In anime. In books that have never touched ink. Your likeness, often wrong, often wild, is still everywhere, because the world can't let go of the idea of you. Of the man who walked alone, fought with honor, and wrote down everything he learned with brutal, beautiful honesty. They ask, even now, centuries later. Who was Miyamoto Musashi? The answers vary. Some say you were a killer. Some say a saint. Some say a man haunted by ghosts. But those who truly listen, they don't answer at all. They just pick up a brush. Or a sword. Or a question. And they begin again. The duel on Ganryujima was over. The sun still hung low above the waves, casting golden reflections on the blood-speckled sand. Sasaki Kojiro's body lay where it had fallen, limp and quiet, a figure once hailed as a god of the blade now still as driftwood. And you stood over him not with triumph, but with a slow, sinking heaviness in your chest. There was no cheering. No applause. Just the wind. The duel that had drawn the attention of provinces, that people would speak of for generations, had lasted only moments. One strike. One decision. One death. The silence afterward was louder than any war cry. You turned, leaving the corpse where it fell, and walked wordlessly to the waiting boat. Your carved wooden sword, an oar repurposed mid-journey, was still clutched in your hand, its splintered grain marked with the memory of the final blow. As the boat pushed off, you didn't look back. Not at Kojiro. Not at the island. And not at the faces that stared after you, caught between awe and horror. Back on the mainland, news of the duel spread like fire in dry grass. They said you arrived late to unnerve him. That you fought with a piece of driftwood to humiliate him. That you killed Sasaki Kojiro with a single blow, then turned your back as if nothing had happened. They got most of it right. But none of them understood the part that mattered. You didn't feel victorious. You felt empty. Kojiro had been more than an opponent. He was the mirror image of your path. A reflection sharpened by discipline, honed by purpose. Where others fought to protect, to avenge, to rise in rank, he had fought for the same reason you did, to master something deeper than any sword stroke. And now he was gone. Another ghost to join the long procession in your memory. The weight of that haunted you in ways no blade ever had. You wandered for a while after that. Not toward the next duel, not toward another challenge, but simply, away. Through forests dense with morning mist. Along rivers that whispered secrets only the mountains could hear. Each step heavier than the last. The roads felt quieter now. Not because they were. But because you were. You stopped accepting challenges. Let them call you coward if they wished. Let them whisper that the storm had passed. You didn't care. The truth was simpler. You'd reached the top of the mountain, and there was no one left up there with you. Even the clink of your swords at your side began to feel intrusive. You wore them still, out of habit, but your fingers no longer itched to draw. There was no glory left in the edge. No thrill in the clash. Victory, it turned out, was a lonely crown. Sometimes, late at night, by the crackling light of a campfire, you'd replay that final duel in your head. Not to gloat. Not to relive a moment of brilliance. But to ask yourself, was there another way? The answer never came. Only the wind replied, brushing through the trees like Kojiro's breath, reminding you of the weight you now carried. Others began calling you invincible. Unbeatable. A living legend. But those same people couldn't meet your eyes when you passed. They didn't see a man anymore. They saw a shadow. A ghost. A story too sharp to touch. You wondered then, not for the first time, if this had always been the endgame. Not to build a legacy, but to outlive it. And slowly, your path turned inward. You stopped in temples, places you once dismissed as resting spots for the weak. But now, you listened to the monks. Their chants. Their stillness. Their quiet detachment from the world. You didn't bow. You didn't kneel. But you stayed. Sometimes for hours. Sometimes for days. They never asked your name. They didn't have to. You began sketching again. Small things at first. A bird perched on a rock. A ripple in the pond. A child carrying water. You began to see that these moments held more meaning than 1,000 duels. Your brushstrokes grew more precise. Like your swordplay once had. But now, each stroke wasn't meant to cut. It was meant to remember. To honor. To understand. You weren't escaping the warrior's path. You were completing it. One morning, deep in the mountains, you paused beside a narrow stream. The light danced off its surface like silver leaves. You removed your swords and placed them gently beside you. Then you sat, not to meditate, not to plan, but simply to be. In that stillness, you heard something unexpected. Not the roar of a crowd. Not the ring of steel. You heard peace. And for the first time in your life, it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like coming home. By the time you reach your 40s, your name has become something other than a name. It's a symbol. A warning. A prayer. Miyamoto Musashi, the swordsman who never lost. The storm in human form. The last man you ever want to see standing at the end of a blade. But those who repeat your legend miss the most important part. You never fought for victory. You fought for understanding. And now, as your hair grows silver and your footsteps grow slower, a new chapter begins. One that has nothing to do with opponents, and everything to do with truth. You retreat. Not to a temple, not to a castle. But to a cave. A cold, lonely hollow carved into the bones of a mountain in Kyushu. Its name is Ryugando. The Spirit Rock Cave. No guards. No walls. No disciples carrying your things. Just rock, wind, and silence. It is perfect. You arrive with little. A few scrolls. Ink. A writing brush. Your swords, though they remain untouched, resting like old friends beside the fire you build each night. No longer instruments of death, but relics of a life lived at the edge of the blade. Here, you begin again. Not as a swordsman. As a student. Of stillness. Of time. Of the void. You rise with the sun, not to train, but to listen. The wind through the reeds. The drip of water echoing through stone. The flutter of a crow's wing as it lands at the mouth of the cave. Each sound is sharper than any duel. Each moment more real than all the victories you ever claimed. And slowly, you begin to write. Not for glory. Not to leave behind a legacy. But because the truth you've found, battered out of you by years of blood and fire, is too heavy to carry alone. It must be passed on, or it will vanish with your last breath. The brush moves across the paper like a sword once did through air. Smooth. Direct. Unflinching. You begin with earth. The book of foundations. Of stances, roots, and principles that do not bend in the storm. Then water. Adaptability, change, flow, what you learned fighting men twice your size, or twice your pride. Then fire. Timing, spirit, aggression, what burns inside when hesitation would kill you. Wind comes next. Not the element itself, but the breath of other schools. You write what you've seen. What you've rejected. You name no names, but those who read it will know, tradition is not always truth. And then comes the final scroll. The void. The one few will understand. Here, there is no form. No strike. No stance. Only awareness. Emptiness. The space between thought and action. You pause more between brush strokes now. Not because your hand is weak, but because the ideas are too vast for words. The brush cannot always capture what the soul knows. Still, you write. Because you must. Each word on the scroll is a battle fought. Each sentence, a cut-through illusion. Sometimes, young men find their way to your cave. Wide-eyed. Eager. Burning for the chance to see the legend with their own eyes. You let them sit. Let them ask questions. But you rarely answer. Not directly. Because your lessons aren't meant to be handed out like coins. They're meant to be earned, like scars. You offer only what they're ready to hear. A phrase. A story. A moment of silence, stretched long enough to make them question everything they thought they knew. Some leave frustrated. Some return. And a few, stay. They carry firewood. They sweep the cave. They try to mimic your brushstrokes when you're not looking. And in return, they learn, not how to kill, but how to see. You do not give them your legacy. You let them find their own. One morning, the wind shifts. The birds fall silent. And you feel it, deep in your bones. Your final duel is approaching. Not against another man. But against time. Your body weakens. The hand that once shattered legends now trembles as it lifts the inkstone. The legs that once marched across half of Japan now ache after a few paces. And yet, you feel no fear. You've met death many times before. On muddy roads. In crowded dojos. Under cherry blossoms and moonlight. This time, it comes not as an enemy. But as a companion. You prepare the way a warrior should. Not with panic. With presence. You dress in clean robes. Not for ceremony, but for respect. You place your swords at your side. One hand resting on each. Not to draw. But to honor. They've walked with you your whole life. They deserve to be there at the end. You sit cross-legged. Breathe in. Exhale slowly. And then you go still. Not because you are defeated, but because you have nothing left to chase. Nothing left to prove. Only peace. And as the final breath leaves your body, the wind outside the cave carries your name, like a whisper carved in stone, drifting down the mountain, across fields, rivers, temples, and battlefields. The warrior has laid down his sword. But the path he carved remains. Long after your body fades into the stillness of Ryugando Cave, the world refuses to forget. Your story lingers. Not in quiet tombs or family shrines, but in the rustle of bamboo leaves. In the sharp glide of ink on parchment. In the breathless hush of a duel just before the first blow is struck. They say your ghost walks with swordsmen on the brink of battle. They say your spirit watches from the shadows when a young warrior steadies their breath, blade trembling with anticipation. And though the man has vanished, your presence only grows. The Book of Five Rings spreads across Japan like wildfire on dry grass. At first, only monks and swordsmen read it, those desperate to understand the storm you once were. But soon, generals and scholars, traders and monks, even rival lords once fearful of your name, begin to study your words. Not because they want to swing a sword. Because they want to master themselves. Each scroll offers them something different. Earth teaches them discipline. Water, adaptability. Fire gives them courage. Wind teaches awareness. And the void? The void dares them to understand what cannot be seen. What cannot be taught. What must be felt, through silence. Through stillness. Your words do not shout. They whisper. And in that whisper, 1,000 readers find clarity. Meanwhile, your life becomes legend. And legend becomes myth. Some claim you could cut lightning from the sky. Others say your stare alone could stop a duel before it began. A few insist you once defeated an entire dojo using only a rice spoon and a bad attitude. Children turn your name into games. Play fighting under plum trees, they shout, "I'm Musashi," as they chase each other through temple courtyards. Traveling performers act out your duels in town squares, often exaggerating them until they border on the absurd, slicing mountains in half, or meditating while balancing on the edge of a spear. And yet, even the wildest stories carry a core of truth. Because you were never just a swordsman. You were a path. A question. A challenge. To live not by custom, but by clarity. To strike not in anger, but in purpose. To seek mastery not in others, but within. Warriors who once mocked your dirty clothes and unkempt hair now build schools in your name. They teach your two-sword style, Nitten Ichiryu, with reverence. They bow before faded scrolls, tracing your brushstrokes with quiet awe. And in their pupils, in their breath, in their sweat, you are reborn. Again and again. Somewhere, in a candlelit room, a scholar copies your teachings into a new scroll. Somewhere, in the cold wind of a mountain pass, a student draws two wooden swords and begins the first kata of your style. Somewhere, in the heart of a man facing impossible odds, your spirit murmurs, "Be still. Know the moment. Strike with intention." And when nations change, when emperors fall and borders crumble, your name endures. Not because it's carved in stone. Because it is carved into the marrow of every soul who seeks to walk the lonely road of mastery. Centuries pass. Japan becomes something new. Steel gives way to gunpowder. Samurai fall. Castles crumble. But your book is still read. Your style is still practiced. And your face, often romanticized, sometimes softened, appears in books, plays, films, even games. A man who fought alone. And won. A man who lived not by birthright, but by blade and thought. And died, not on a battlefield, but in stillness. There are statues now. In parks. Near the cave. At shrines built to honor your spirit. Some sculptors give you calm eyes, others give you a wild mane of hair. Some show you mid-duel, frozen in a strike. Others depict you seated, brush in hand, staring into eternity. But none of them capture the whole of you. Because Musashi was never just a man. Musashi was a mirror. Held up to every soul who's ever wondered, can I master myself? And the answer, whispered by wind and ink and time, is always the same. Only if you dare. Centuries after your last breath, a boy steps into a quiet dojo in a faraway town. He doesn't know your name, not yet. He only knows the floor smells of sweat and pine, that the air tastes like old wood and discipline, and that something ancient lives here, just under the surface. He lifts a practiced sword. And with the first awkward swing, he awakens you. Because you are still here. Not in flesh, not in blood, but in rhythm. In motion. In that unspoken moment before the blade moves. And as he trains, falling, rising, striking again, you stir. Not as a ghost, but as a guide. You were never chasing glory, Musashi. You were chasing understanding. And that understanding outlived you. It lives in every quiet student who refuses to give up after failing 100 times. It lives in every artist who sits in front of a blank canvas and dares to begin. It lives in every soul who walks alone, not because they enjoy the silence, but because they know that true strength is forged there. Your final lesson wasn't written in the Book of 5 Rings. It wasn't sealed in a duel or carved into stone. It was this. The way of mastery is the way of presence. You taught the world that the sword is only ever a tool, like the brush, like the pen, like the breath. The real weapon is awareness. You showed that discipline is not rigidity. It is freedom, shaped by choice. You showed that victory without wisdom is simply destruction. You showed that to live fully, one must die to ego, again and again. And in your last years, you taught the most difficult truth of all, that the blade must eventually be sheathed for good. That the body breaks, that memory fades, and yet legacy remains. But not the kind written in gold. The kind etched into the hearts of those who seek truth in silence. Those who walk the path alone, not because it is glorious, but because it is necessary. So now, when a warrior lifts a sword and clears their mind. When a painter stares at an empty canvas and breathes. When a philosopher asks not what to do, but how to be. Your shadow walks with them. And somewhere in the wind, they feel it. Not fear. Not ambition. Not even pride. Just stillness. And that stillness is you. Your name is not just a name anymore. It's an invocation. A vow. A reminder that a life can be both ferocious and reflective. That a man can break 100 bones and still pause to admire the curve of a falling leaf. That mastery is not an end, it is a direction. You are Musashi. And your path was never just your own. It was a map. A question. A fire lit in the hearts of those bold enough to choose the long, hard road over the easy applause. And so now, even in this moment, long after your last duel, your last breath, your last word, someone, somewhere, opens your book. They read your simple, sharp sentences. They lift their head. And they walk into the world with new eyes. Not seeking to conquer, but to understand. And as they walk, barefoot on cold earth, quiet heart in a loud world, they do not speak your name. They do not need to. Because the silence says it for them. And your story, Musashi, never ends.